And hello, my brave knights, princesses, and princesses, and gather friends, and welcome to my review of Sherlock Holmes, The Awakened. Oh yes, I played Sherlock Holmes, The Awakened, alright, and there are good things about the game. It is a better game in terms of how it's structured versus the first game, and there are things that are problematic with it that is more toward the plot than anything, and we'll discuss all of that in this video. So buckle up. So as you know from my first video, if you've seen my Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 review, you know I'm a Holmes buff. I won't pull out the books and bore you. If you haven't seen the first video review of the other game, go do that. This game is a remake / rebuild of the original Sherlock Holmes The Awakened, also made by Frogwares. They remade the game, rebuilt it from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5, and they made it and put it on Kickstarter, and it succeeded, and here it is. So we're going to start with the gameplay of Sherlock Holmes The Awakened, and it's basically like every other Sherlock Holmes game where you find where you interview people, you talk to people, you find clues, you put together conclusions with the evidence you gathered, and you progress based off of those conclusions. So that's basically the gameplay. You solve puzzles. They're not really difficult per se. They're very simple, actually. Most of the puzzles in this game are. A lot of them are just photographic ones, or ones where you have to remember where things are, and you have to kind of rely on your sense to find things, and that's okay. The gameplay side of this game is alright. It's engaging enough to get things rolling. No, you don't have to measure the shoe size still. The game automatically will tell you what the shoe size is, so Frogwares has learned their lesson still. Ever since the Testament of Sherlock Holmes, they have done the shoe size measuring for you. We don't have to do that anymore. It's very nice. The graphics in this game are awesome. They've done very well with the graphics. The whole game looks amazing. It's very good. It's very good. So now we're going to move on to the story of this game. And the story is the problem, in a way. There are plot holes to this game that needed to be addressed, but the game never really addresses them. And that's the focus of this video, in a way, because we glossed over the gameplay because there isn't a lot to say about it. On top of the other thing about the gameplay is that it doesn't matter. When you observe people and you look over them and you draw your conclusion based off of their appearance of what kind of person they are, it doesn't matter whether or not you get it correct, because as with Telltale games, which is what I compared this game to, a Telltale game, it doesn't matter what you do, the outcome is still going to be the same. There is no good or bad ending necessarily in this game. There is more a good and bad choice, but the game kind of forces you to make a choice at the end. So, in a way, you don't get a choice. You choose one thing, because if you choose the other, the game just restarts you again from a certain spot, and you have to make a certain conclusion, which is really stupid. You should be able to make a right or wrong conclusion, and the game should end with those conclusions, not just one conclusion. But if you want to see the conclusion of this game, go play the game for yourself. That's not what we're here for. The story starts with Holmes looking into robberies all over London, and it kind of leads nowhere. He goes out, he talks to a florist, and then finds out that the bookkeeper likes the florist, hence why he's been the bookkeeper's been putting flowers in front of his shop for the flowers to see. And Holmes is doing all this because he thought that he was trying to be killed based off of an observance of a cactus thorn on a newspaper in a waste bin, and it turns out to be nothing. And then Watson, who's in this game, the real Watson, not the Watson from the first game, this is John Watson from the war and all of that. They've done an interesting spin with him where they make him more human and apathetic, which is fine with me. They keep the originality of him, though, so it's fine. He's still a pure and simple creature, but he is Sherlock's lifeline, basically, as he always has been. Mrs. Hudson is also mentioned in this game, and so is Mycroft. Mycroft does make an appearance in this game toward the end of the game, and he's fun as always in the sense that he's what he is. It leads from that to Watson telling Holmes about a servant that goes missing, to Holmes going to that mansion to find out about the servant, do clues, not really getting anywhere. They go from that mansion to a port, and from that port to a bar, and from the bar to an asylum, and then the missing servant is kind of forgotten about, gets lost in the story. We never find out if we find him or not, because we go to the asylum, and then it's like we find out there's a person, there's this lady running the establishment, and the experiments that are going on there, which are unethical, as they were back then. It goes from that to finding out that the head doctor that used to run the place is actually a patient now, because the current head doctor has been doing experiments on him and messing with his memory, and that goes nowhere because the game kind of just leaves at them and trying to find out if the guy remembers anything or not, and the only way he remembers things is by writing. Going from that to going to the U.S. in Louisiana, and go from there, wandering around, pretending to be somebody, getting in trouble with the sheriff about it, and that leading to a house, leading to finding a lost brother, leading to finding the lost master of the brother, to a lighthouse. And there are many threads that are left. For example, we don't know what happens to the doctor after the fact. We don't know what happens to the brother who lived in that house. He's very intelligent and has a sister who asked us to find him. We don't know what happens in Louisiana with the lady and the boat woman. We don't know if they succeed in their endeavors of taking over the town. We don't know what happens to the servant we originally are looking for. All we find, as the game goes, we do find the master of the house, and when we also, along the way, find out about all this Cthulhian mythos, and it's mixed into this game. It's there's so many things happening in this game at once, to where you kind of get lost a little bit if you're not careful. But really, it's just Cthulhu, and that's it. And the madness that it causes. The Cthulhian moments in this game are very interesting. I do like the architecture that they use and the ethereal spaces they use in the game. It's very impressive. You don't see Cthulhu in this game. You see statues of him, but you don't actually see him, of course. Sorry for those who wanted to see him. When it comes down to wandering around places, the good news is, unlike in Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1, they've toned down you running everywhere to a confined space of, like, say, you running around up the block instead of running a marathon all over the city trying to find where you're going. They've learned from the first game to not divert your attention to everything, but to keep your focus on what you're trying to do at hand, which is wonderful. So I did not get lost nearly as much as I did in the first game. There were times I did sort of get lost. However, the game was nice enough to provide a hint system, which if you press C, it'll light up the area, and if you've missed stuff, it'll tell you. But if you got scrounged over everything, that's kind of where it gets kind of difficult, because it's like, what do you do now? There's no way to know unless you go into the conclusions system and just put together the conclusions, and then the game will progress that way. And sometimes you have to use your arrow keys to highlight different thoughts, and then things will light up, which again, you wouldn't know that unless you experimented with it. So again, this game is better than the last one. We played it and I beat it, hence why this review is being spoken of. It's better. As I said, it is a better game than the previous one in many ways. However, as I said, there are plot holes, a lot of plot holes. This game felt like it was sped up during like the middle point. Like things started like ramping faster and faster and faster and faster, and it felt like you couldn't really breathe and like slow down as the game got to its climax. But overall, it's a better game than the first one was, and it isn't at the same time, because again, it feels like they had a story, but they didn't have it packed down enough to where it was a good story. Like, it was decent enough, but most of the time it was like Cthulhu. And I'm just like, yes, Cthulhu, but what about all this other stuff that you're talking about on the side here? Because it's important, because you can't just have characters appear and then disappear and not explain what happened to them. I do think, and this is my opinion in theory, that they're going to do Arsène Lupin next, given how he was mentioned in a newspaper toward the end of the game. And I'm betting that's what they're going to do next, is Arsène Lupin. And if they do, I will totally play it, because it's going to be interesting. And then I am highly betting that they're going to do, after they do Arsène Lupin, they're going to do Jack the Ripper again. And if they do, I will totally play that, if they keep it like this. However, they better do better with the story, to where everything makes sense, everything fits together. Because if they jump from one thing to another while leaving things open-ended, it doesn't do well if you're trying to make a good story. However, there are ways to make things open-ended to where there's enough vagueness but enough information to where the reader can make their own conclusion, which is fine. That's my review. It was basically a crash course review. I would give this game a 7 out of 10. It's good. Worth playing. You won't get lost in the game. You might, but there's enough, the game leaves you enough breadcrumbs to where you can get through it. Because if I can do it, all of you can do it. Let's just put it like that. So with that, that's it. Leave a like and subscribe, because there's always room for more. And I'll see you in the next video. See you guys.